So this is in between two batches that I had already run. You'll see that I am going to clean the hopper and that blade section there. I like to clean that and make sure that all of the chicken skin and any little pieces of bone are out of there to just help keep the grinder running smoothly. So I'm just unscrewing the faceplate here. Once I get that off, I am going to take off the plate, the grinding plate, which is the coarse grind, so it leaves bigger chunks of food so that they're literally having to chew their food versus just inhale it. And then the blade comes off, and then between the blade and the, gosh, I don't know what that piece is called, the gear that pulls the meat down into the grinding function. You'll get chicken skin caught up in there if you're using chicken that has skin. So every couple of batches that I do, I will clean that so that it just helps keep the grinder running more optimally. Keeps that flowing without getting stuck or getting bound up with too much meat stuck behind there. So putting it back together, just screwing the faceplate back on now. And when I screw the faceplate on, I do not tighten it down, hand tighten. I do a light hand tighten, because if you tighten it too much, it's very difficult to get off the machine once you are done and you go to clean it. So I've turned it on now, and I'm just feeding the legs. I buy chicken legs. I'm feeding the legs in, and I'm feeding them in most of the time with the ankle joint first. And the reason I do that is because it just pulls it in quicker. You'll see that this is real time. So the length of this video is the time that it takes to clean the hopper twice and do 2 full batches. So you know, this grinder goes pretty quickly. So I put the legs in, and I put half of a 5-pound pack in first. Then I will do half a package of the chicken livers, and then I will go back and I'll do the other half of that 5-pound package. And so that's roughly half of my my batch. And then once I get to the middle of that batch, you're going to see that I will put in the rest of the chicken livers, and I will put in the frozen green beans in there. I will also put in things like fruits. I could put in fruits and stuff like that. I just didn't do that in this batch. I change batches up, but this is the main portion of my batch every time, is these 3 ingredients. So I will put in the rest of the chicken liver. I'll put in the frozen veggies, and then I will put in another half of a second 5-pound package of chicken, and I will grind that up and let that grind up. Now you see that I put my hand here into the front of the grinding plate here, and that's because if you watch closely in this first portion of the video, you'll see that this will shoot pieces of chicken and bone and stuff right out, and it'll fly pretty close to where the camera was sitting. So I will usually just put my hand over it to keep everything from flying around my kitchen, so that I am a little more clean as I'm doing this. Mind you, this is not clean at all. It will make a mess. So just be aware of that. So I'm at a point where I've put in the half of the second batch of 5 pounds. I'm going to mix all of that up by hand so that I'm getting all of the liver and all of the green beans mixed in. And like I said, I do that all by hand. I'm using a very large pot is what I use to mix it in. And then I will do the last half of that second 5-pound package of chicken. And I'll do one more quick blending of it by hand. with the green beans in there, you can, and the liver, both of those, you can really see the blend and how well you've got it blended because of the contrast of the ingredients, especially when you're using things like blueberries really stand out. You can see if you've got a bunch of those in one section. So once I'm all done with that, I will, again, here I am mixing everything up. And then I have a helper. I'm sure you've seen her walking back and forth in the video a couple of times. My daughter helps me with the packaging side of things, which is very helpful. And this process takes about as long as it takes for her to package it in the little containers. So I take the pot over and I dump it in a big mixing bowl for her to be able to scoop out and put into the containers, which I'll show you here at the end. So again, I'm going to do a second batch. That was a first batch. That was 10 pounds of chicken to, I think those are 16 or 18 ounce containers of chicken liver. So it's a little more than a 80-10-10. And then I do, 12, those are 12 ounce packages of green beans that I put in there. So I do the livers, the green beans, and 10 pounds of chicken. Now, is it exact? No, it is not exact, because you're not going to get exactly 5 pounds of chicken in a package, but that's not a major big deal as long as they are getting what they need. This one may be light on chicken. It may only be 9 pounds and 9 3/4 pounds, but the next batch that I do is going to be 10.5 pounds. So, it kind of fluctuates. I do look at the weights as I'm setting the chicken up on my counter, and I look to see what is close as much to making 10 pounds together. If I find a 4.5 pound and a 5.5 pound, I'll put those together so that we're, at least close to 10 pounds of chicken. So here I am putting in the second batch. Sometimes I will put the ankle joint in first. Especially on the bigger pieces of chicken, it will pull into the hopper much easier. The smaller pieces will pull either the top joint, which is typically where the hip joint would be in the chicken, right? Is that the hip joint? I think it's the hip joint. It would be where that hip joint is in the chicken. It will grab on smaller pieces into this hopper. Now, I've used 2 separate grinders since we've been out here. The first grinder I bought and used for about 2 years, and then the gear inside got a little bit loose and it wasn't functioning properly, so I ended up going with a bigger grinder, and I love this grinder. It takes me 10 minutes to do a couple of batches of chicken, so it doesn't take terribly long. I'll put those in the blog here so that you have links to where to find those. I just bought them on Amazon, but I'll give you the information on the ones that I am using. So here I'm mixing everything. I believe this is a final mix. There's my helper again. We both wear gloves, but I wear gloves because I prefer not to have chicken under my fingernails. So you'll see that everything I have is I'm gloved here. I'll do another clean here of the blade and the hopper and everything so that we can walk through that cleaning process again. So again, unscrewing it, be sure not to screw that too tightly or you'll fight getting it off. Pulling off the plate, the grind plate. As you can see, that's a big coarse grind. I grabbed a pair of pliers because that got stuck in there, and it gets stuck in there often, so I always have a pair of pliers that I can just kind of wiggle it off because it gets stuck consistently in there. Pulling all the excess pieces of meat off and putting it in my pot, pulling it all away from the wheel that pulls everything in, and so that all the pieces now are in my pot, and they'll get put in with the with the food once we get there. I'm just cleaning all of the pieces, the little bony pieces off from around the edges. I put the gear back in. I put the blade back on. I just put the plate back on. You can see that's got 3 holes in it, which is a coarse grind. You can grind it more into a hamburger consistency. It just is more work on the grinder. And then your dogs tend to want to just inhale it. So I like this one. It forces them to chew. So from here, you'll see this is where I dump it. And then my daughter uses this 8-ounce scoop and puts them into the containers. And then we stack them over here before they get stored in the freezers.